Hello, everyone. I'm Liza Hausman. I'm Vice President of Industry Marketing at House, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to today's conversation with two amazing women leaders, Melissa Kennedy, President of Meadowlark Design Build, and Susan Wintersteen, CEO and creative of Savvy Interiors. Welcome, Melissa and Susan.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing your insights with our community today. As a backdrop for the many topics we're going to explore today, can you first share a little bit about your firms and the work you do? Susan, why don't we start with you?
So I am the CEO owner of Savvy Interiors. We are a design-directed general contracting firm in San Diego, California. I also run a nonprofit called Savvy Giving by Design, which is a separate entity, but we have national chapters across the country that House has been a strong supporter of over the years, where we make over kids' rooms facing a medical crisis. Melissa?
Love it. Yeah, I work in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I work for Meadowlark Design Build. I'm the president there. I've been part of Meadowlark for about 17 years. Started when we were in the upstairs of a garage, and now we're about a 40-person company. We do mostly remodeling with a couple custom homes a year.
Super. Thanks, you guys. So, one of the things that we talked about earlier and that I think is a particularly interesting topic is this idea of a career arc, that there are different points in our journeys as women leaders, as women, as business women. So I want to start a little bit with that arc. Maybe share some anecdotes about your career arcs and maybe a pivotal moment that defined sort of your path to leadership or a point in your career journey.
Do you want us to start, Melissa? Or you want
Sure,
me to...
I can go. Yeah, Susan, I had a great conversation a couple days ago, so we'll try to ping pong back and forth. But I think leadership has been an evolution for me over time. And, looking back on my life, I know that there were things in middle school and high school that I participated in that sort of started me leading. I specifically remember after I got out of college, I worked at an architecture company for a while, and then I joined Meadowlark as their first hired designer in 2007. And when I hired another designer, I started seeing that designer be extremely fulfilled by the work that they were able to do. And I received more fulfillment in seeing her design with clients than I did when I was designing. And so I think that was the point where I started to realize that I enjoy giving people space where they're valued and can do the work that they really find fulfilling, and I get fulfillment out of that. And so I think that was one of the epiphanies I had of maybe not doing the work is actually what I love, but finding people who can do the work that then I get the privilege to lead and guide along the way. That was really pivotal for me. And then as the company has grown, developed a design team, and then got into construction, I found that I personally really enjoyed solving problems and looking into the future and figuring out how we were going to solve problems that kind of come along as you grow and as the economy changes and as you evolve. And so the leadership started, I think, fairly young as far as leading a team, but has really led into and fed into my curiosity of fixing problems and then creating a sustainable business for employees to then do what they love. That's where it started.
Yeah, it's interesting because mine is probably opposite. I think when I started the business as more of a hobbyist, decades ago, I really enjoyed working with the client, and I really enjoyed leading a team. And I have a certain vision in my head of what I think it should look like. And I think that's what I'm always striving towards. And that vision has changed over the years. And as I was explaining last week, as you start to grow and you start to learn, it's that maintaining of the curiosity of learning that keeps me engaged day to day. But I've been everywhere from a large team to a small team, and the leadership for me has morphed over the years. where I used to think that leading was trying to teach others to do it the way that I did it, and realize that I don't derive the same satisfaction that you do from seeing other designers thrive in that way, because I want them, I know a formula that works for me, but I realize that there's not a lot of me's, and everybody has to have their own way of doing it. And that doesn't always align with the vision I have in my head of how it should be. Like, I have very high standards. And I think one of my challenges as a leader over the years has been, how do I keep this standard here and get people to operate here? And what does that look like? And there are some things you have to give up to get to maintain that type of leadership. And part of what I found in leading a larger team was I was giving up a little bit of quality control of the vision that I had in my head of how I wanted our clients to perceive us, how I wanted contractors to perceive us, how I wanted a finished product to come out. And there are pros and cons. If I were willing to let go a little bit of some of that standard or that vision that I had, I think I could give up on a little bit of the quality control, but I really missed that. And it wasn't as fulfilling. And so as I'm on the tail end more of my career now and seeing where the economy is 5 steps ahead, down the road, I am kind of condensing and pulling back in a little bit, I think, in my leadership, and being able to focus more on what I really want out of the company, what I want to derive from it, and how I want to lead it to this kind of next chapter. For sustainability for the long term, because I wasn't really feeling fulfilled in trying to be everything to everyone and trying to lead all these different groups of people, if that made sense.
Yeah, when Susan and I talked earlier, I think it's been interesting. It's almost like the different paths and where we're at right now. It's like the kind of hard that we've chosen, and it's different. And I find that super interesting. I think as a leader, it's like, what kind of heart are you choosing? What do you want to tackle, and what aligns with your strengths? And Susan, you're an owner of your company, and I'm not. I run the company for 2 owners, Doug Selby and Kurt Brandon. And so, I think that too is a difference for both of us and kind of our paths of leadership. But I think it is interesting to really lean into the hard that you want to tackle, and make sure that hard is fulfilling you, and not just draining you.
Yeah. And I think that's really my passion. I mean, I think you're an incredible manager, and just listening to you talk, when you talk about guiding your team and the fulfillment you feel when somebody has fulfilled their dream or their purpose within the company. And certainly that is admirable. I have never been able to quite crack that nut. I think that for me personally, I find leadership falls probably more into project management and in leading a project with subcontractors. And I enjoy that probably more than I do with employees. Mm-hmm. And it's a different dynamic. Some of it is, I found that over the last 5 years, leadership within the workplace with employees, with a generation that's coming in, has changed for me personally over the decades. Like, it wasn't what it was 20 years ago. And certainly in the last 5 years post-COVID and with more remote opportunities, things have shifted and morphed, and certain experience levels have been, we've seen a lot of job hopping in our industry. We've seen a lot of embellishments of experience, people coming to the table thinking that they have, these levels of experience. And it's, you try to hire for the person, but you also, as a smaller company, need to hire for skill set. And sometimes when that capacity isn't there, or the sensitivity is a little heightened, or whatever it is, it really makes it challenging to lead employees. And so I've really kind of refocused some of the leadership really on subcontracting, because you're working with these pros in the field that know their field better than you do in a lot of cases, and you rely on that level of expertise to work collaboratively with them. And I prefer to lead in that type of environment than I do in a more hierarchy of a employer-employee. And so kind of condensing and really restructuring this stage of the career is more around peer structure instead of more of a hierarchy of like, oh, well, you're a junior designer to this, lead designer to this. I find that I really want just a group of professionals, of peers that each take on their pivotal role within the business.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear both, from you, the different perspectives on what leading is. And part of that is, where you are in your careers, but as you said, the hard that you've chosen, like the type of work that you enjoy, that you're willing to do the hard for and that you want to do. And for each of you, that looks very different right now at these different points in your careers. Susan, you kind of mentioned that people coming into the industry have changed, or generationally there are some differences. So for both of you, I think company culture plays a large part into getting alignment with a team. So maybe talk a little bit about, what has company culture meant to each of you, and how are you shaping that?
Do you want me to go first again with this one?
Sure.
I'm happy to talk a little. Yeah, company culture. I've been at Meadowlark a long time, so I think the owners have always wanted Meadowlark to be a place where people enjoy coming to work to, but also that like the homeowner experience isn't different than the employee experience. And we grew fairly quickly from 2016 to 2019, and kind of became a company that didn't really match internally the experience we wanted to give our homeowners. And so our company started EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, in 2019, and it was because culturally we really weren't who we said we were out to the public. And that kind of like teeter-tottery feel as a leader, where you kind of push things externally and then you realize you need to do some work internally. And I feel like it's a little bit of a ping pong, like work on external and then internal. And so we really focused on what do we value, like what are our core values, and not just with our employees, but with our subcontractors and with our homeowners. Because when you work with people whose values innately aligned with what you value, it makes some of these it doesn't make easy things hard, because there's like fundamentally a foundation that you're all operating from that's intrinsic to who you are. And so culturally, when we started to, we say hire, fire, recognize and reward based on our core values and really get serious about them, then we started to both coach the team that we had in place along with these values and alignment with these values, and then hire in alignment with these values. And that has been a game changer for difficult conversations, because we come at them from a value standpoint and not like what's right or wrong, but does the decision making align with our values? I think to Susan's point of like challenging to hire people, like we find people that align with our values, which is awesome, but finding people with the skill set and the capacity to learn design and to learn construction and to learn build has been challenging. So there's two parts to the equation, I think, for a successful employee and for building at least our culture. And every person, we let them know when they come in, like there's no like coming in and not contributing. You're either making us better or you're making us worse. And Susan, like every employee either can add value or become a liability. And so that's the risk you take when you're hiring people or when you're growing your staff. And so we really do pay attention to like how people can grow and influence our culture for the good. Liza knows, because we've talked about this before, but I like thinking about maintenance and how maintenance takes continuous work and continuous effort. And I feel like leading to core values is similar to the maintenance of like eating healthy or exercising. Like it takes continual effort to keep at it and keep enforcing it so that people keep making decisions. I'm known for showing up on job sites and quizzing our frame crew on what are our core values. And so people have them memorized. Mostly they get kind of nervous, when I ask about them and maybe forget one or two. But I think, if we have these memorized, then they're on the tip of our tongue, they're in the front of our brain, and we're looking for them, not just in ourselves, but in our teammates and our colleagues, and then also in the wonderful trade professionals we work with, and then also in our homeowners, because it's really nice. It's really nice to know that you're valued for the work that you do. And if those core values are foundationally the same or aligned, then it just makes the hard things hard and not the easy things hard.
Susan, I know, yeah, you similarly had, I think I saw, job security comes from performance, not tenure. So I'm curious how you think about people.
Oh gosh, I'm probably more on your cynic side. I agree with everything Melissa said, and I remember, and I have been there, with the core values and employees. And I think just me, like I said, you guys all have to remember, I'm on the tail arc of my career, right? I'm looking for my next chapter, longevity, the semi-retirement piece of like, I love what I do, and I'd love to hang on to it as long as it's still fulfilling for me and it checks the boxes. But I don't, I think this fundamentally, our society, our work culture has changed. And I don't think there's any denying that. So post-COVID, we have young people that are afraid to pick up the phone and have a phone call. And in the construction industry, that's a really, really deadly combination. If you're afraid to talk to a contractor or pick up a phone and make a call, and you prefer text messaging 99% of the time, and it gives you anxiety to make a phone call, that's a problem in this industry. If you feel like all of your friends can't believe that you have to be at work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you tell me that, like, that's a problem. That's not the construction industry. And so I think that we are in this culture right now, this work culture, where the pendulum has to find this middle ground. It's not all one way and it's not all of the other, but the days of ping pong tables in the workplace and nap blankets and, snack time are probably like need to come back to that center, where we still have the responsibility to service clients and to show up at work and not be quite so fragile in, having to miss, something, or maybe schedule our appointments after work like we used to, or, there are things and limits and lines that as employers we have to draw. But I think that employers have been like, the culture is shifting, right? Like there's no denying, like I'm the generation like my parents, those kids in their darn dungarees, right? I'm that generation person now. I'm now old enough to look and go, I remember when. And I think that today there's got to be some sort of a middle ground, that if you're going to survive in a construction and design industry and in a design build firm that operates here and that has high standards and moves very quickly, you have to be agile enough and you have to be flexible enough and confident enough to come in with a solid set of skills, personality wise, not only skills in design, but skills in critical thinking, which somehow we seem to have lost over the years. And, like picking up the phone and following up with notes and taking notes. It's fine if you want to take them on your iPad, but take notes. Don't just show up with your phone, like have something, be prepared. And I fear that a lot of this younger generation, gosh, I'm dating myself. They're coming in slightly unprepared for what the demands are of this industry. And a lot of our really good contractors are starting to age out, and a lot of our artisans are starting to age out. And that pendulum has to swing back, because we've got all these young people going to college and they're getting all these great degrees, but we're losing a lot of our tradespeople, and people don't understand the complexities of construction. And so I think that if you are a designer, a young designer who's smart and has good critical thinking skills and have some talent in there in your designs, you're going to go far, and you probably won't work for a firm for a very long time. You'll be on your own. You'll be doing something. And design build, it's a different beast. We're a little unusual because we're general contractors, and that's not every designer's experience, but certainly there are a lot of designers out there that do project manage and run construction projects. So I guess that was a very long-winded answer to my cynicism is probably showing a little, but I think that it's figuring out how to work within this new paradigm of employees.
Yeah, I think, when you mentioned snack time and ping pong tables, like I think maybe coming out of school, that's people's impression of like what healthy culture is. But the reality is like, nobody's going to show up to snack time if you don't like the person you're with. And so, like I think really getting clear on like, what does culture look like at my company? Right. And then like driving the behavior. So right, culture probably looks like being responsive, like you do what you just mentioned, Susan. It's like basic disciplines that people need to have to succeed in this industry. Mm-hmm. So I think in my mind, it's like, you don't want to be fighting about the basic disciplines like finishing your timesheet on time or being available for a 7 a.m. call because that's when they're showing up to the job site, you know,
Right.
or the inspector showing up. I think there are like a series of disciplines that are not shared from my perspective too, from working at home. Like it requires an availability and a presence
Sure.
and a discipline, and then the critical thinking, the critical problem solving, that then I think make hanging out at the ping pong table fun. But otherwise, like, I'm not showing up, you know?
Yeah.
So this is making me think about, all right, this is great advice for people, you know, young women and young people coming into the industry. One of the topics we talked about was, you know, being a woman and working, you know, in design and construction. A lot of times people say, oh, what are the challenges? And I think we should talk about those. But I'm also really interested in, what do you think are the assets that women bring to the industry? You know, I think there are a ton, and it's really important. And we bring sort of unique perspective and a certain approach. So I'm interested to hear from you both what challenges you faced and maybe some anecdotes and how you dealt with maybe some challenging situations, but also how you feel you've brought your sort of unique perspective or skills as a woman.
I'll tell you, just this last week, I showed up to a job site and a project manager from another company came up and asked me where my project manager was to tell him information that he was just going to come to talk to me about. And I said, well, you can just tell me, I'm right here. So I just think it's interesting that there's still this deference to talking to another man or talking to somebody that they perceive as being in charge of a project management when I'm on site. I've been told over the years, you know, like every woman, I'm sure, just smile. You know, what do you need from me? Is there anything else you need to do your job? Oh, just smile. You know, okay, great. Thanks. And I think there's an inherent, like, you're not going to understand. You don't understand the technical stuff, whatever. I think what women bring to the job, certainly from a design perspective, is creative solutions, creative problem solving, being agile enough and being able to run several different things at the same time, not being as sequential, but being able to multitask and bringing different trades in at different times and strategically thinking about how to maximize time and space, being somewhat organized. I can't tell you how many bids over the years I've gotten on a napkin or a text message or a piece of paper or a scrap piece of paper that I've had to translate and subcontract out and make it look professional and cohesive and compliant to California laws. So, you know, it's just the ability to take a disorganized thing, this mass, and reorganize it in a way to present professionally to a client to be able to sell it. So from that standpoint, I think women and designers have a real skill set in being able to pull multiple pieces together and make it into one cohesive package.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Susan, I like what you said about maybe women don't need to be as sequential and can think a little bit differently about that. I was thinking about when a project manager walked in, a new project manager we had hired, and this was when we were smaller and in a smaller office, but he saw me and looked at me and said, do you answer the phones? And I was running design at that point, and I just smiled and nodded because I thought, you know, eventually he'll figure it out. And I do answer the phones, you know, I do that too. But I just kind of smiled and nodded, but that always stuck with me. And one of the designers looked at me and said, you didn't say anything, you know? And I thought, no, because like if eventually he can see, like, my actions will prove that. But that was something that definitely stuck with me. And then you know, interestingly, I had a closeout meeting with a client, and it was maybe 2016, 2017. And she, you know, I really love the clients that you can, you know, that really want you to succeed, that like give you advice for just future growth. And she said to me, this was before I was on kind of overseeing construction for my company, I was on the design side, but she said to me, you should really hire some female project managers. And so then when I got to hire, kind of post-COVID, we hired some female project managers, and I got calls from some of my trade professionals that we work with, and they one specifically called me and said, you know what your female project managers do differently than the males? And of course I was all ears. And he said to me, they listen. And I loved that, because I think our culture is very much not good at listening or hearing what people are saying. And so to have female project managers on site really leaning into what are, similar to what Susan said, what the experts are saying, and taking that and being able to think critically about that, and then making a solution that works was extremely meaningful. And so that listening it just really stuck with me. And so that's from my female project managers, and it really has made an impact.
I have a great story. This happened about 2 years ago. God, this is so good. I'm going to condense it. I was a subcontractor on site. So this has been my experience, is that when there is conflict and you have to reprimand a male somebody, it often comes back as, again, the stereotypical female, designer. She was rude. She was, said all these mean things that, blah, blah, blah. And I was in the car with my daughter. We were driving, and I got a call from a subcontractor. He installed something incorrectly. I called him on it. I said, I'm sorry that this happened. I will take 50% of the accountability. I didn't tell you the exact height, but we went and templated everything. Please, can you go back and move this? And he got very defensive and agitated right off the bat, and very aggressive. I'm just trying to keep the peace, de-escalate the situation, very professional the whole time. Called our operations manager, who he thought was the owner of the company, because he's a guy, called him to complain about me, saying that I cussed him out on the phone. And unbeknownst to me, my daughter recorded the entire conversation, because as soon as she heard that it was going south, she pressed record on her phone. I have a 6-minute conversation of the most professional but he flat out lied to try to throw me under the bus, because for whatever reason, not knowing who I was in that situation. But that was so incredibly validating after 20 years, because of all the times I've heard I was sharp, I was rude, I was mean, I was this, I was that. And here I had a recorded conversation of the most appropriate business conversation. Never once have I ever used profanity in talking to anyone that I've worked with in my entire life, let alone with him. But I just, again, the difference between men and women, right? Like, if that had been a reverse situation, there's definitely a gender inequality when it comes to these sort of things. And this kind of huff and puff, and I'm going to call your boss and, talk to them about how you spoke to me and all of this sort of stuff. There's definitely ego, and there are definitely challenges in the workplace, I think, for women in working with other people. So I thought that was such a incredible experience, that I was really pleased that I had that actual physical proof for other people to listen to. It was great.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Great stories from both of you. Well, let's shift gears a little bit, because I know a lot of what folks are very interested in hearing about is how you avoid burnout and stay creative. So how do you make space? So, people talk about work-life balance, but how do you make space so that you do stay motivated, so that you do have time to do the things that you enjoy and that you feel like you're bringing your best self to work?
I think this some early events really shaped this perspective for me. Soon out of college, my father passed away, and within a year, my mother-in-law passed away, and both relatively young. My dad was in his early 50s, and my mother-in-law was in her late 50s. And so very quickly, I realized, like, time is capped. And you realize, like, time is the most valuable thing that we have. And so that really shaped my ability to always create capacity for doing some of the things that I love. And in that period of time, taking care of a sick mother-in-law and a sick father, fresh out of school, you're really busy with the things that are important, but not things that you choose. And so now I'm really busy with the things that I've chosen, which is a wonderful place to be. But I don't know that I would have gotten here so quickly had I not had time spent doing things that, I was happy to do, but also it was really hard and not chosen. And so now the things that I do, I'm a pretty disciplined person with my morning routine. So mornings are when I thrive. I love the sunrise. And so I spend time, I'm a faithful person. I spend time praying and reading my Bible, and then some quiet time. Of course, that's like before all the kids wake up. So I enjoy the quiet moments then. I like to exercise. I think when I got out of design, I realized I needed to fill a creative spot in my brain. And so I started playing the viola, and I'm no good. I'm not good at it at all, but I have the most forgiving viola teacher, but at least exercises that kind of part of my brain that I don't get much experience at work anymore. And and then from previous conversation, Liza knows I do really long races. So I find running races on trails. And so I find a lot of clarity kind of being alone and doing personal challenges. And I think, Susan, to the point of like managing a lot of people is pretty exhausting. When I'm out on the trails doing these, I do ultras, so anywhere from 30 to 115 mile runs. There's a beautiful ease knowing that the only thing I have to do is put my next foot forward, and I am controlling the whole duration of this race, as opposed to my day-to-day is sort of relinquishing control to a lot of other people that are doing things. And so I think personally, that's how I find, I think, some empowering and some like mental fortitude in doing these trail races, so that when I'm still filled with the dopamine of those races, I feel the energy to, kind of empower others and relinquish control. But that's personally what I found to really be fulfilling and help balance the sort of work and then the adventures that life is. And again, I'm very, very conscious that these are all the things I get to choose right now, because that time in life when I was extremely busy with sick parents, that was a different set of challenges and kind of restricted my ability to choose to do other things.
Wow. I'm duly impressed. You're way more driven than I am. I probably just like my first answer was like, I probably watch Netflix. I don't know. I just
do you?
I don't do any of that. Gosh, what do I do to avoid burnout? I think I'm still learning. I think I'm still the student here. I think that I'm at my age. My husband asked me, I think I told you this the other day, Melissa, my husband asked me all the time, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And I'm like, I don't know. I like my job, but I want to retire, but I don't know. And I want to live in Tahoe, but I want to live in San Diego, and I don't know. And I'm still learning. I'm still figuring it out. I think avoiding burnout is real. I think certainly condensing has helped me with that. Having less people pulling at my time has helped with that. My dogs are a huge stress relief for me. That sounds so corny to say. The nonprofit probably is my biggest rebalancing tool. I think being involved in the nonprofit has given me a perspective, being able to work with a population that normally would not afford interior design or have that resource available to them, and knowing that we're improving the quality of their lives or their recoveries is probably my biggest antidote to burnout. Is that when I've got somebody else that which I haven't had in a long time, a client that's been really, outrageous. But every once in a while, you remember those client stories of they're devastated over a seam in a couch, and you're like, that's not real devastation. That's fixable. You can throw money at that. That's not a real problem.
Yeah. Right.
Real problems are the problems that you can't throw money at. And that's, health and wellness and these young babies that are really struggling. So I would say that's probably the antidote, although that can be stressful in its own way. I think ultimately really trying to redefine the role that I have within the company and what I want to do, and the longevity is going to be my cure for burnout. It's always morphed and changed according to my capacity and what I wanted to do. And so when I wanted to be big, we were big. And when I want to be smaller, we're going to go smaller. And I think I'm far more now intentional in the projects that I choose and very selective. And they have to meet a lot of, again, I have this standard here and these clients have to come here to meet me, because I no longer have an interest in coming down. So that part's been very satisfying. And so we're getting there, but I'm still a work in progress, most definitely.
Susan, what I really admired about your trajectory of your career too is the honesty that you've had with yourself of like, this isn't actually what I want to be. And I think that takes like a healthy courage and bravery to shift gears. And I think really recognize and be real about where you're spending your time and how unfulfilling it is. And then pivoting to make a change. And I think leadership can sometimes make you feel stuck if you just keep going through the motions without spending time reflecting on, like, is this actually giving me life? And I do think about, like, how many needs am I trying to meet through other things? And, is it because work's not meeting them? Or how can I craft work so that it meets the needs? And so I think, talking to you about your trajectory, I really admired that. Like, I think it takes a bravery to be real about where you're at, where you've grown, and then dissatisfaction with it. And then to be able to pivot so that you are working on the hard things that actually do give you life, instead of draining you.
That's very kind. It feels good in a lot of ways, intentional in a lot of ways, but scary in other ways as well too, right? It's easy to kind of keep on the same path and do what you've always known. But one of the things that got us to where we are today, I think, is the ability to recognize when something has to change and be able to, I'm not afraid of change necessarily. Like, I probably changed too often, maybe. But I think, I think continuing to morph and grow and go in a different direction. You spend so many years trying to figure out how to do your job, and then you figure out how to do it. And then you're like, how can I do it for less time? And then you figure that out and you're like, okay, how do I get out of here? So I think I'm in the, how do I get out of here stage? So
There's a mentor I have, Mark Richardson, who's said the term change or become extinct. And I've really grabbed onto that. I think everybody, may be changing too fast sometimes, but that change or become extinct always feels relevant.
Well, especially in today's world with everything that's going on with our economy and the costs and how that's going to morph and change our industry in the coming years. I want to go in lean, and I want to go in strategic, and I want to go in making sure that I'm committed to how to manage these new challenges, both from a tariff perspective and economy perspective, less people moving around and buying new homes, and what does that look like? So somewhat strategic, somewhat intentional over the last couple of years of taking on a certain population and cutting out another population of potential clients, and turning down a lot. So again, going back to the burnout, not saying yes to all of it, and being very mindful of the drain that certain types of clients are going to have on projects and budgets, and making sure that I'm somewhat insulated from some of the economic ups and downs, hopefully, knock on wood.
Makes a lot of sense. Excuse me. Within this conversation that you're having about avoiding burnout and staying creative, Susan, one of the things that you had mentioned previously that I'd love to talk to both of you about is this idea of non-negotiable boundaries, because those can exist in a lot of different places in your life to sort of protect you and support you. So Susan, I'd love to hear a little bit more about those and how you set those and in what parts of your life.
Yeah, I think, there's so many ways to apply it, but just from the basic, educating your clients on how to communicate with you, and, what your limits are going to be on, working on the weekends or not working on the weekends, or after hours or before hours, or text messaging, or how things are submitted by subcontractors, how things are talked about. I think it kind of, for me, those boundaries are really about what type of projects we're going to take on and how we're going to handle those projects and how we're going to be strategic about seeing them through to completion. And so Melissa and I were talking about, costs. And I was explaining, our good faith estimates and good faith costs and preparing our clients earlier in the process than we used to. We used to be able to give a, average for a remodel and then come in, design it, and then it would come in within that average. And now with the volatility in the marketplace, and certainly with the increase in labor costs, a lot of clients are operating in numbers that were 5-10 years ago and aren't always in the reality base of today, especially in Southern California. And so our process has had to change and morph, and the boundaries around that are, listen, here are some good faith numbers. This is what this is going to cost today. If you were to do this footprint change, I haven't even selected materials yet. So I need your buy-in here before I'm going to continue on and move forward, because the last thing we want to do is design something that you can't implement because the labor costs have come in more than what you anticipated them. So education is a huge part of that. Making sure that we're educating our clients on all these. I'm sorry, I've got a dog.
I love it. It's okay. It's great. The dog is like, yes, I'm here to be your emotional support animal.
He is my emotional support, and he just climbed right up on the banquette to sit next to me. So that is real life. That is my non-negotiable boundary. I have to have my dogs with me. So anyway, I think that those boundaries are around how you're treated in the workplace, both from your subcontractors and your clients, in addition to budgets and educating your clients on what to expect earlier in the process so that you have a successful outcome. And then that just makes everybody happier.
Yeah, I think treatment in the workplace was really brought top of mind to me when we had a wonderful man who worked with us, and he went to a job site and came back. He has a lot of value to me, just like a wonderful person, and works in the field. And he came back to me really devastated because of how a client treated him. And he was, you could just tell like the spirit was out of him. And it really had an impact on me. And so I called up our lawyer and I was like, what can I do about this? And he's like, well, you can add a code of conduct to your contract. And so we added a code of conduct to our contract. And, there's some basic stuff. And one of the lines I like is feel it, say it, because I didn't want to get to the end of projects and people would be disappointed in the dust protection. I'm like, we could have fixed that, earlier. But more importantly, like the code of conduct says, like, treating everybody with respect on the job site, and goes into some more details. And so now our design team reviews that with clients as part of the contract, that, this is our code of conduct, and like, this is how we live by, and this is how we expect to be treated on job sites. And we've brought it up a handful of times, and it's been helpful. But I think the most important thing for me is that when we showed our trade professionals and our staff that we put this code of conduct into our contract, they felt really supported. And I think in an industry that often doesn't get much support, that people aren't going into, it really made me happy that we thought to put this into our contractual agreements. And so I think even in leadership, like you have a responsibility to do things at the level you're at, to do things that influence change for the better. And so, really making sure that you take those issues and do something about them, which can sometimes be scary, but I'm really proud of that move we made because of the support it showed, and then because of the conversations that we can then sort of open and honestly have with clients. Made a difference.
Yeah. It's contracts can make a big difference in sort of also setting boundaries and setting expectations, and avoiding disputes. And I know that's another sort of lesson that many firms learn over time, and contracts often are evolving documents based on your experiences and what you want to change, or prevent from happening going forward. I thought it's an interesting conversation around clients and kind of how they see what you do for them and your role. So Susan, one thing I like that you said is that design is about solving problems with intention, not just making things look pretty. And that's a way of defining the work that you do. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that, and maybe from you, Melissa, too, about, how do you want clients to see the work that you do, and what do you do to ensure that sort of they are valuing what you're doing, and who you are?
I think because one of the things that I think clients appreciate about our process is the education piece, and that I want them to understand the thought process that goes into it. So that starts at the very, very beginning when we do our design process, our discovery, where we're gathering all the information and the questionnaires. And I want to know, like, I want to be in their house making breakfast that morning. I want to know what steps they take. I want to know when they go to their coffee pot and what drawer they're opening to get their coffee out of right now, and how the space is functioning for them, what's working and what's not. And so when I gather that information from them and I'm taking that in and I'm making all of those considerations when I'm designing, I am reflecting back to them on my selections or my layouts and saying, listen, I put this drawer here because I know every morning you had told me that you do X, Y, and Z, and I wanted to make this a little easier for accessibility or for universal design, or I created this niche over here because your daughter said that she likes to do X, Y, and Z, and I wanted her to have the ability to do that. Once I can kind of relate back what it is that they told me, and that goes back to listening, and it goes back to one of the things I think the biggest critiques of some other designers that have worked for me is that they didn't listen. They didn't listen to what was told to them. And what we want to do is really give them that education back of the why. Why did we choose what we did? Why are we doing what we're doing? But in design, there are a lot of right answers, right? It's not one specific answer, and there are a lot of ways to tweak. You could have a couple of right answers, but in the creative problem solving, I want clients to understand how we're critically thinking about a space. And so I was telling Melissa before the call that, where we had, or maybe I had already said this in this call, I don't even know, but cabinets, like we had this refrigeration line that had to be put into a wall, and there were all these conversations, and then just like tweaking a slight design element, we were able to accommodate it in a chase behind a cabinet, which the guys didn't know about, or other people may not know about, because that's what we're there for. We're designing creative solutions so that we don't have to make it harder, but there are a lot of right answers. It's still going to look great. We're not compromising the design at all, but it solved a problem. And so having the clients understand why we're doing certain things that we're doing, or why we're incorporating certain things or materials, why we're selecting materials, why we're picking a particular fabric or a particular wood type for an application. Education is probably the number one, and understanding about the construction and how it's constructed and then knowing that we understand and that we're the professionals, there comes this level of trust. Like, oh, I know that, she's got it because she understands it. It's not, I'm just picking a tile to go in here and a tile in the shower pan. I understand the application. I know I'm not going to put fabric wallpaper into a kid's bathroom, like linen, into a shower. I'm not going to do that because that wouldn't be practical, right? So having that understanding and knowing that clients know we have that understanding builds that level of trust. And that's probably one of our tenets and core values, is really making sure that they understand the strategic decisions behind it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find too that if you don't solve the right problem, so if you're not listening for and solving the right problem, no, they're just not going to want to pay for it either. Not solving their problem doesn't fix it. We had a homeowner a couple of years ago. I was working through design with him, and he said every move he makes, he wants to accomplish 3 things, so that no move is just wasted on solving one problem, but that everything is solving 3. And I just like that idea in general of making sure that when you're carrying a new initiative or doing something new or fixing a home so that it operates better, if you can make it so that you're accomplishing more than one thing with any move you make, then that involves like creative problem solving and more collaborative thinking and really understanding the problems so that your moves are, like you said, Susan, just intentional everywhere.
Great. Well, we've got some questions from our audience here. So Susan, Stephanie wants to know, what advice can you give to a woman looking to start her own design firm after working for another firm for several years in a different role? Interior design and remodeling are my passion, and I'm ready to start out on my own.
Great question. I have no advice other than know what your money generating activities are, know where your client base and your pipeline is going to come from. Realize that all of the issues that you've had working for your employer are going to be yours someday. And so have compassion for like what that's like, because everybody thinks it's, you have one perspective as an employee and you have a whole nother perspective as an employer. Unfortunately, I never worked for another firm. I was always on my own. I was too old to go work for another by the time I started, had too many children. I wasn't going to go back to school. So I, kind of went for it. I don't know that I recommend. I was very privileged to be able to have a husband that was working full time at that point to support my dream of kind of going off on my own. And now we work together. So there's benefits in that. I would say have a plan in place, but take risks, calculated risks. Have be willing to talk to people, be willing to do things and step out of your comfort zone. Have, all of your documentation and get some really good marketing materials, really pay for really good photos and get your information out there to as many people to lay eyes on it as possible.
Yeah, great advice. I think that the networking, hopefully the time that she spent, she's built up a network and people are familiar with her. It's getting those initial projects and getting them photographed. So you have a place to build on, a platform to build on is so important.
One differentiator I will say lately has been, we've had AI and there was a real push when AI first came out and renderings and stuff like this, that if you didn't have a portfolio to choose from, to go out and just use AI or use renders as your portfolio. I think today that's been oversaturated. I think we see this influx of designers that have started out on their own, that their entire portfolio is digital representations of spaces or renderings, pretty pictures without real substance behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, if I were starting today, I would go to your friends and family and offer to do it for free. Work for as many clients for free as you possibly can. It's a soft cost. Build your portfolio with real actual projects and get real actual good photography. Save all of your money and get a good photographer for those first 4 to 6 projects. Put real projects out there, because you will learn so much about design and about actually installing a room. I've had designers that have worked for me that said they've worked in design for 8 years that have never installed a room of furniture on their own ever. But they had pretty pictures. But really when push came to shove, the substance is there on real life experience. So go through the real life experience, get good photographs, even if you have to work for free, and build that portfolio in that way, than relying too much on AI or renders that don't really reflect actual work, because you can do a lot with really good photos.
And I like that you also said, you've got to know your numbers. I'll do just a little mention here of the House Pro software. And the goal there is really to make sure that you don't lose any information and you're able to track your numbers. And I will say, we also, if you're a subscriber, we have 2 courses, a full course from a designer business coach who works with top designers, and also Mark Richardson, who is coaching Melissa, did a course for us on the remodeling and construction side. So those are available and good resources to learn from, and be happy to share those out. Melissa, we have another question, and maybe for both of you. Have you identified any methods that have worked in finding the middle ground between the difference in generational views of work ethic and time? How do your teams work to find the middle ground? And what have you implemented that has boosted morale and kept true to the beat of construction?
Wow,
that's a good question.
Big question.
Yeah, I will say I think it's really challenging. Susan mentioned the demands of construction on job sites, and also women. I think it's awesome to get women into the field, and it's really hard. There's a lot of women that do the before school activities and are like on call for the kids and also on call for construction. And so I think there can be a lot of like challenges at play, just with time and management. Can you repeat the second half of the question?
Yes, absolutely. So the second half of the question is, what are you doing to boost morale, kind of, I guess, in these situations, or to find the middle ground and keep people moving?
Yeah, I ask a lot of questions. I think there's a lot of like surface level issues that can sometimes sink morale, but again, like getting to the root issues to make sure that we're solving, as leadership, we're solving the right problems so that that morale can be heightened and people feel supported. And I think there's also a lot of construction can tend to be extremely reactive, and so trying to shift into more of a proactive mindset, like how can we tackle some of these things before they actually become problems, and then people aren't fighting fires, which makes morale go down. And yeah, and so I think really asking questions to make sure we're actually solving the right problems has been important.
Yeah, and I think, I'll add to that right, feeling or positive morale isn't about snacks and ping pong. It's about people feeling like you care about their development, that they feel appreciated, that their work is acknowledged. And so sometimes simple things like just acknowledging that your team is working hard, or positively reinforcing the behavior that you want, right? And not just critiquing that you don't like is another kind of good way where they get a warm fuzzy from doing the right thing. That works. That can work incredibly well. All right. Well, I think we are at the end of this conversation, although I feel like we could talk about these topics forever. I'm so grateful for your time, Susan and Melissa. We've had such lovely comments from attendees about the insights and experiences that you've shared. And we are recording this, so we're going to send this out quite widely. And I know we're going to have thousands more that are going to enjoy and appreciate you. So thank you again. And to everybody, I hope you have a wonderful day or evening.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yes. Thank you both.
Bye, everybody.